"Ma'am, the individuals at the gate are refusing to leave. They are claiming to be family." The voice of my head of security crackled through the intercom system. It was a calm, professional baritone that contrasted sharply with the chaotic scene playing out on the high-definition monitor mounted on my wall. I took a slow sip of my wine. It was a vintage Cabernet, thick and dark, the kind that tasted like oak and old money. I stood in the darkened living room of the sprawling lake house, the only light coming from the fireplace and the blue glow of the security screens. Outside, a torrential rainstorm was battering northern Michigan, turning the landscaped gardens into mud. On the screen, I could see them. Pamela and Walter. My parents. They looked pathetic. Pamela, my mother, was clutching her designer handbag against her chest as if it could protect her from the rain. Her hair, usually sprayed into a helmet of perfection, was plastered to her skull. Walter, my father, stood behind her, hunched over in a windbreaker that looked 2 sizes too small. They were banging on the wrought iron gates, screaming something that the wind tore away before the microphones could pick it up. "Ma'am?" the security officer asked again, waiting for instructions. I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind of smile a shark gives before it drags a seal under the water. "I see them," I said into the intercom. "Do not open the gate yet. Let them wait in the rain for 5 more minutes. I want them to really soak it in." "Copy that." I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked out at the storm. 7 years. It had taken me 7 years to get to this exact moment. To stand on the dry side of the glass while they drowned. My name is Sloane, and I am 25 years old. But to understand why I'm letting 2 50-year-olds freeze in a storm, you have to go back to the day my life ended. Or rather, the day it truly began. It was my 18th birthday. March 3rd. I remember the date because the air still held that biting winter chill, the kind that hurts your lungs when you inhale too deeply. I had walked into our suburban living room expecting something. Maybe a cake. Maybe a card. Maybe just a quiet dinner where we pretended to be a happy family for an hour. Instead, I found suitcases. 2 large, mismatched suitcases sitting by the front door. Pamela was sitting at the dining room table. She wasn't baking. She wasn't smiling. She was typing furiously on her laptop, a stack of printed spreadsheets spread out around her like a fortress. Walter was in his recliner in the living room, staring at the television, though I noticed it wasn't even turned on. He was staring at a black screen. "Mom?" I asked, dropping my backpack. "What's going on? Are we going on a trip?" Pamela stopped typing. She took off her reading glasses and looked at me. There was no love in those eyes. There wasn't even hate. There was just calculation. Cold, hard math. "Sit down, Sloane," she said. I sat. My stomach started to twist. "Your father and I have been reviewing our finances," she began, her voice steady, like she was running a board meeting. "As you know, we have always had aspirations. Dreams. We have been eyeing the lake house property up north for 5 years. It is finally on the market." "Okay," I said, confused. "That's great?" "It is great," she corrected. "But it requires capital. Significant capital. And in reviewing our expenses over the last 18 years, we have identified a major drain on our resources." She turned the laptop around so I could see the screen. It was an Excel spreadsheet. At the top, in bold letters, it said, "Sloane, cumulative expenditure." I stared at the numbers, horrified. "Orthodontics, $5,200, she read aloud, pointing a manicured fingernail at the row. "Piano lessons you quit after 2 years, $3,400. Clothing, food, school supplies, medical co-pays. We have tracked every penny, Sloane." She scrolled down to the bottom. The total sum was highlighted in red. $245,890. $245,000, she repeated. That is what you have cost us. And do you know what the ROI, the return on investment, is on that $250,000? I couldn't speak. I felt like I was choking. 0, she hissed. Actually, it is negative. You are not a prodigy. You barely maintained a B average. You did not secure a scholarship. You are not dating anyone from a wealthy family who could elevate our status. You are plain. You are average. And in this economy, average is a liability. Mom, I'm your daughter, I whispered. Tears were stinging my eyes. I'm not a stock. I'm a human being. You are an adult, she snapped. Legally, as of today. Which means our obligation to maintain this non-performing asset has ended. We are liquidating our position to invest in our future. We are cutting our losses. She pointed to the door. Get out. I looked at my father. Dad? Please. You can't let her do this. I have nowhere to go. I'm supposed to start community college in the fall. Walter didn't look at me. He just rubbed his temples, his voice weak and shaking. Listen to your mother, Sloane. She's good with money. We need this house. It's our turn to be happy. Pamela stood up and walked over to me. She picked up a white envelope from the table and shoved it into my chest. We are not heartless, she said. We closed out the junior savings account we opened when you were born. This is the balance. I opened the envelope. Inside were two $20 bills, a 5, and 2 ones. $47. That is your severance package, she said, opening the front door. The cold wind rushed in. Take the suitcases. They are filled with your old clothes. Don't come back until you can prove you aren't a waste of space. Which, frankly, I don't think will ever happen. She physically grabbed my arm and shoved me toward the threshold. I stumbled, grabbing the handles of the suitcases. You're a rotten investment, Sloane, she said, her voice filled with disdain. And I'm done throwing good money after bad. The door slammed shut. The deadbolt clicked. I stood on the porch of the only home I had ever known, holding $47, while the first drops of rain began to fall. The first night was a blur of shock and adrenaline. I sat in my car, a rusty, 10-year-old Honda Civic that I had bought with my own money from babysitting jobs, parked 2 streets away from my parents' house. I just stared at the steering wheel, waiting for them to come running out. Waiting for them to say it was a sick joke. Waiting for the porch light to flicker on as a signal to come home. It never happened. By 3 in the morning, the cold had seeped through the thin metal doors of the car. I curled up in the back seat, buried under a pile of old sweaters from one of the suitcases, and cried until my throat felt like it was bleeding. I had $47 and a quarter of a tank of gas. When the sun came up, reality hit me like a physical blow. I needed a shower. I needed food. I needed help. I drove to Courtney's house. Courtney had been my best friend since the 3rd grade. We had planned our entire lives together. We were supposed to be roommates in the fall. Her parents, the Davisons, had always been nice to me. They were the cool parents who bought us pizza and let us stay up late watching horror movies. I pulled into their driveway at 7 in the morning, my eyes swollen and red. I knocked on the door, shivering. Mrs. Davison opened it. She was in her bathrobe, holding a cup of coffee. When she saw me, her face didn't light up with concern. It twisted into a mask of disgust. Mrs. Davison, I croaked. Please. My parents, they kicked me out. I don't know what to do. Can I just come in and use your phone? Can I talk to Courtney? She took a step back, blocking the entrance with her body. I think you should leave, Sloane, she said coldly. What? I blinked, confused. Why? I just need help. We know, she said, her voice dripping with judgment. Pamela called us last night. She told us everything. Told you what? About the drugs, Mrs. Davison said, lowering her voice to a whisper. About the jewelry you stole from your grandmother to pay your dealer. About how violent you got when they tried to stage an intervention. My mouth fell open. What? No. That's a lie. I've never touched drugs in my life. My grandmother died 3 years ago. I didn't steal anything. Save it, she snapped. Pamela warned us you were a pathological liar. She said you'd come here with a sob story. We are a respectable family, Sloane. We cannot have a junkie in our home. Just then, Courtney appeared in the hallway behind her mother. She was holding her phone up, pointing the camera at me. Courtney. I pleaded. Tell her. You know me. You know I don't do that stuff. Courtney looked at me with a mix of pity and repulsion. I don't know who you are anymore, Sloane. Just go. Before my mom calls the cops. She snapped a photo of me, disheveled, crying, looking exactly like the addict my mother had painted me to be, and then slammed the door in my face. I stood there, stunned. It wasn't enough for Pamela to throw me out. She had to destroy me first. She had launched a preemptive strike, poisoning the water so that no one would help me. She wanted to make sure I had nowhere to go, so that my failure would be absolute. It was a tactical nuke on my reputation. I got back in my car and checked my phone. I went to Instagram. Blocked by Courtney. Blocked by my aunt. Blocked by my cousins. I had a notification from a cousin in Ohio. A direct message. It read, I hope you get clean, Sloane. Don't contact us until you are sober. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat. I screamed. A raw, guttural scream that shook the small frame of the Honda. She had won. She had taken my home, my family, and my name. I started the car. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay in this town. Every set of eyes felt like an accusation. I drove north, toward the city limits, simply because that was the direction the car was facing. That afternoon, I stopped at a gas station to use the bathroom. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. My hair was greasy, my eyes were dark circles, and my clothes were wrinkled. I looked exactly like what they said I was. I bought a bottle of water and a pack of peanut butter crackers. That cost me $3.50. I had $43.50 left. I drove until I found a Walmart parking lot in the next county. I parked in the back row, between an RV and a dumpster. I reclined the seat. This was my new home. A 2008 Honda Civic with a check engine light that flickered like a heartbeat. I locked the doors, checking them 3 times. I took the tire iron out of the trunk and placed it on the floorboard next to me. I wasn't Sloane the daughter anymore. I wasn't Sloane the student. I was just a statistic. A problem to be solved or erased. And as the sun went down on my second day of freedom, I realized that my mother was right about one thing. In the real world, nobody cares about your potential. They only care about your value. And right now, my value was exactly $43.50. You learn very quickly that homelessness is mostly about logistics. Movies make it look dramatic, sleeping under bridges, warming your hands over trash can fires. The reality is much more boring and much more exhausting. It is a constant, grinding math problem. Where can I pee without buying something? Which parking lots have security guards that tap on your window at 3 a.m., and which ones ignore you? How long can I run the car heater to stop shivering before I waste too much gas? I learned the sink shower technique. You go into a single-stall family restroom at a grocery store. You lock the door. You strip off your shirt and use wet paper towels to wipe down your armpits and chest. You wash your face. You try to wash your hair in the sink, but the motion sensor faucet keeps turning off every 5 seconds, so you end up with half-rinsed shampoo sticking to your scalp. You learn that hunger isn't a sharp pain. It's a dull, heavy fog that sits in your brain. It makes you slow. It makes you angry. I tried to get a job. I really did. On my fourth day, I walked into a discount clothing store that had a help wanted sign. I used the last of my wet wipes to clean my face. I put on the cleanest shirt from my suitcase. The manager, a tired-looking woman named Brenda, hired me on the spot because I spoke clearly and didn't have any visible tattoos. "Can you start tomorrow?" she asked. "Yes," I said, feeling a spark of hope. "Absolutely." I worked for 3 days. I folded shirts. I organized the clearance rack. I was good at it. I thought, okay, this is it. I can earn enough for a gym membership to shower properly. Then maybe a room in a shared house. On the fourth day, the manager called me into her office. She looked uncomfortable. "Sloan, we have to let you go," she said, not looking at me. "What? Why?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. "I showed up on time. I did everything you asked." "We received a call," she said, shuffling some papers. "From a concerned member of the community. They informed us that you are under investigation for theft at your previous residence and that you have a substance abuse issue. We can't have that liability here." My blood turned to ice. That was my mother, wasn't it? The manager didn't answer. She just slid an envelope across the desk. "Here is your pay for the 3 days. Cash. Please don't come back." I took the envelope. $120. It felt like blood money. She was tracking me. She wasn't content with just kicking me out, she wanted to make sure I couldn't survive. She wanted me to crawl back on my hands and knees so she could slam the door in my face again. November turned into December. The Michigan winter is not forgiving. It is a beast that hunts you. The nights got longer. The temperature dropped to 10 degrees. My car, my faithful, rusty Honda, started to struggle. The engine would cough and sputter every time I turned the key. Then, the inevitable happened. It was a Tuesday night. A blizzard was rolling in. I was parked behind an abandoned warehouse because the cops had kicked me out of the Walmart lot the night before. I turned the key to start the engine and run the heater for 10 minutes, my nightly ration of warmth. Nothing. I tried again. Silence. The battery was dead. Or maybe the starter. It didn't matter. The result was the same. I was trapped in a metal box that was rapidly becoming a freezer. I sat there in the dark, my breath forming clouds in front of my face. I was wearing 3 shirts, 2 sweaters, and a coat, but the cold was biting through them like needles. I checked my wallet. I had spent most of the job money on gas and canned food. I had $4.50 left. My phone battery was at 12%. I stared at the screen. I could call the police. But then what? They would tow the car, my house. I would be in a shelter, and in this county, the shelters were dangerous. I felt a tear freeze on my cheek. "You win, Mom," I whispered to the empty air. "I really am worthless." The cold started to make me sleepy. I knew that was a bad sign. That's how people die. They just drift off. I shook my head violently. No. I was not going to die in a Honda Civic to prove my mother's spreadsheet right. I was not going to be a line item that ended in 0. I grabbed my backpack. I shoved my wallet and my phone inside. I wrapped a scarf around my face. I opened the car door and stepped out into the blizzard. The wind almost knocked me over. I saw lights in the distance. A neon sign flickering through the snow, about half a mile down the road. I started walking. 1 foot in front of the other. The snow was up to my shins. My toes went numb within minutes. But I kept moving toward the light. It was a diner. The sign buzzed and crackled, "Betty's Diner. Open 24 hours. I pushed the glass door open. A bell jingled. The warmth hit me like a physical wall, smelling of bacon grease and old coffee. It was the most beautiful smell in the world. I stumbled inside, snow melting off my boots, and looked at the woman behind the counter. That was the moment my life actually began. The bell above the door jingled again as I stumbled further inside. My feet felt like blocks of ice, heavy and unresponsive. The diner was almost empty. It was 3 in the morning during a blizzard, only long-haul truckers and insomniacs were out. The place looked like a time capsule from the 70s, checkered floors, red vinyl booths patched with duct tape, and the smell of stale cigarette smoke lingering despite the no-smoking signs. Behind the counter stood a woman who looked like she could bench press a semi-truck. She had steel gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and a name tag that simply read Betty. She was wiping down the counter with a rag that looked older than me. She stopped wiping and looked me up and down. I must have been a sight, shaking violently, snow melting into puddles around my boots, my face wrapped in a scarf, looking wild-eyed and desperate. "We aren't a shelter, honey," Betty said. Her voice was like gravel in a blender. It wasn't mean, just factual. "You want to sit, you got to order." I pulled the scarf down. My lips were cracked and bleeding. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my crumpled bills and coins. "Hot water," I whispered, my voice barely working. "Just, hot water, please." Betty looked at the $4.50 in my shaking hand. She didn't take the money. She looked at my hands, red, raw, and trembling. She looked at the dark circles under my eyes. She sighed, a long, heavy sound. "Put that away. Sit at the end of the counter. Don't make a mess." I collapsed onto a stool. A minute later, a thick white mug was placed in front of me. It wasn't just water. It was hot chocolate with a mountain of whipped cream. "Drink," she ordered. I wrapped my hands around the mug. The heat was so intense it almost burned, but it felt like life flowing back into my veins. I drank it too fast, burning my tongue, but I didn't care. "You got a place to go?" Betty asked, leaning against the soda machine. I shook my head. I couldn't lie. I didn't have the energy. "Car died. Down the road." "Parents?" "Not anymore." Betty nodded. She didn't ask for the sob story. She didn't ask about drugs or boyfriends. She just judged the situation. "I need the grease traps cleaned," she said suddenly. "And the dishes from the dinner rush are still piled up because my dishwasher called in drunk again. It's dirty work. It smells like hell." I looked up at her. "I'll do it." "I can't pay you on the books," she said, eyeing me carefully. "But I can give you a burger, fries, and you can sleep in the storage room in the back until the storm passes. We got a cot back there. It's warm." "I'll do it," I repeated, standing up too quickly. The room spun. "Show me where." For the next 4 hours, I worked harder than I had ever worked in my life. I scraped congealed grease off plates. I scrubbed pans that were black with burnt food. The hot water and soap stung my cracked hands, but I welcomed the pain. It meant I was feeling something other than cold. At 7 in the morning, Betty told me to stop. She put a plate in front of me, a double cheeseburger, greasy and beautiful, with a pile of hash browns. I ate it with my hands, ignoring the fork. I cried while I ate. Not because I was sad, but because the food sat heavy and warm in my stomach. "You work good," Betty said, refilling my coffee. "You got hustle. Most kids your age would have complained about the smell." "I need the money," I said, wiping my mouth. "Or the food. Whatever. You can stay in the storage room for a week," Betty decided. "You work the morning shift, 6 to 2. Dishes and prep. I'll give you $20 a day plus tips if the waitresses feel generous. And 3 meals." I looked at her. "Why?" "Because I had a daughter," Betty said, her face unreadable. "She ran off 10 years ago. Never heard from her again. I'd hope if she stumbled into a diner somewhere, someone would give her a damn burger." That night, I slept on a narrow cot in a room filled with sacks of flour and cans of tomato sauce. It smelled like yeast and dust. I locked the door from the inside. I pulled out the $47, well, now $43.50, and smoothed the bills out on the concrete floor. Okay, I whispered to the darkness. Sloan, the victim, died in that Honda. Nice to meet you, new Sloan. I slept for 12 hours straight. 6 months later. Routine is a powerful drug. My life had shrunk to a manageable loop: wake up in the storage room, which I now rented from Betty for $50 a week, shower in the staff bathroom, work the breakfast rush, eat, work the lunch rush, sleep. I was saving everything. I had almost $2,000 hidden in a hollowed-out can of peaches in the pantry. It was a Sunday morning in August. The church rush. The worst shift of the week. The diner was packed with families who demanded extra ranch dressing and tipped in religious pamphlets. I was waiting tables now. I was fast, efficient, and I didn't smile unless I had to. Then, disaster struck. The ancient point-of-sale system, a beige computer terminal from the late 90s, let out a high-pitched whine and froze. The screen turned a sickly green. "Oh, for the love of God!" Betty shouted, slapping the side of the monitor. "Not now. We got 10 tickets waiting to be fired." The waitresses were panicking. Customers were getting restless. The line for the register was backing up out the door. "Call the support number," one of the cooks yelled. "They're closed on Sundays." Betty roared, looking ready to throw the machine through the window. I walked over to the counter. I had been reading coding books from the public library in the evenings. It was just something to keep my brain from rotting. I recognized the error code flashing in the corner of the screen. It was a memory buffer overflow. "Move," I said to Betty. "Sloan, don't touch it, you'll break it more." "It's already broken, Betty." "Let me try." I didn't wait for permission. I grabbed the sticky keyboard. I hit Ctrl plus Alt plus F4 to kill the graphical interface and drop into the command line. The screen went black with white text. The customer stared. A man in a suit sitting at the counter lowered his newspaper. I typed furiously. Flush DNS. Clear cache. Restart the SQL service. Rebuild the index. My fingers flew across the keys. I wasn't guessing, I understood the logic. The machine was choking on too much data, it just needed to breathe. I hit enter. The screen flickered. The familiar logo of the restaurant software popped up. The receipt printer whirred to life and spat out the backlog of orders. "We're back online," I yelled. "Order up for table 4. The kitchen cheered. Betty looked at me like I had just performed an exorcism. "Where the hell did you learn to do that?" "Library books," I said, tucking my order pad back into my apron. "And YouTube." I went back to pouring coffee. 10 minutes later, the man in the suit signaled me over. He was a regular. He came in every Sunday, sat at the same stool, ordered black coffee and dry wheat toast. He always had a laptop open. "More coffee?" I asked, reaching for the pot. He held up a hand. He was older, maybe late 40s, with sharp eyes and an expensive watch that looked out of place in Betty's diner. His name was Felix. "I watched what you did," Felix said. His voice was quiet but intense. "That wasn't just a reboot. You navigated a DOS shell. You manually restarted the database service." "The machine is old," I shrugged. "Its memory cache is too small for the Sunday volume." I just cleared the pipes. "You're a waitress," he stated. "I'm a survivor," I corrected. "Waitressing pays the rent." Felix pulled a business card out of his pocket and slid it across the Formica counter. It was heavy, matte black stock with silver lettering. Felix Thorne. Venture Capital and Software Solutions. "I run a small firm downtown," he said. "We build back-end systems for logistics companies." It's boring, unglamorous work, and it makes a lot of money. I need people who can solve problems without waiting for the support line to open. I looked at the card, then at him. I don't have a degree. I don't even have a permanent address, technically. I don't care about degrees, Felix said, taking a sip of his coffee. I care about the fact that you didn't panic when the system crashed. You just fixed it. Call the number. If you pass the entrance test, I'll pay you $15 an hour as an intern. $15. That was double what I made here. I can't work days, I said immediately. I can't leave Betty short-staffed. Felix smirked. Then work nights. If you want it bad enough, you won't sleep. I took the offer. For the next year, my life became a blur of exhaustion. My schedule was brutal, diner shift from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. Bus ride downtown. Internship from 3 p.m. to 10 p.m. Bus ride back. Study until 1 a.m. Sleep for 4 hours. Repeat. I moved out of Betty's storage room and into a studio apartment above a pawn shop. It was 20 minutes from the diner. The rent was $600 a month. The carpet smelled like wet dog, and the neighbors screamed at each other every night, but it had a deadbolt and a shower that worked. It was the first place that was truly mine. Working for Felix was not like the movies. There were no montages of cool hacking. It was grueling, repetitive work. I spent weeks just cleaning up messy code written by lazy developers. I stared at lines of text until my eyes burned. Felix was a hard teacher. He didn't praise me. He only pointed out errors. This code is sloppy, Sloan, he would yell, pointing at my screen. You nested 3 loops. It's inefficient. If this runs on a server with million records, it will crash. Do it again. I'm tired, Felix, I snapped one night. It was midnight. I had been up since 5. I made a mistake. The compiler doesn't care if you're tired, he slammed his hand on the desk. The market doesn't care if you're tired. Do you want to go back to scrubbing grease traps? Is that your ceiling? I stood up, ready to quit. My nerves were frayed. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to walk out and just sleep for a week. But then I looked at the corner of my monitor. Taped to the plastic bezel was a crisp $20 bill, a 5, and 2 ones. The $47. I had kept it. I looked at it every single day. It was my reminder. It was the price tag my mother had put on my life. If I quit now, she was right. If I walked out because it was too hard, I was a bad investment. I sat back down. I deleted the sloppy code. I started typing again. I'll fix it, I said, my voice steady. And I'll optimize it so it runs in half the time. Felix watched me for a second, a flicker of approval in his eyes, before walking away. Good. Have it on my desk by morning. I learned faster than the college grads Felix hired because I was hungrier than them. They coded for a paycheck. I coded for revenge. By the time I was 20, I wasn't an intern anymore. I was a junior developer. I was making $45,000 a year. I stopped working at the diner, but I still went there every Sunday morning to help Betty with the rush, for free. She tried to pay me, but I refused. She had saved my life with a burger, I owed her more than money. But making $45,000 wasn't enough. I checked my bank account constantly. If the balance dropped below $5,000, I would have a panic attack. I bought my clothes at thrift stores. I ate instant ramen. I hoarded every cent. Because I knew something my coworkers didn't. I knew how fast the floor could drop out from under you. One afternoon, Felix called me into his office. He looked serious. You've been doing good work on the logistics database, he said. But you're holding back. You're just doing what I tell you. Real money isn't made by following orders, Sloan. It's made by seeing things other people miss. He spun his laptop around. I have a client. A mid-sized hospital network. Their inventory system is a disaster. They're losing millions in expired supplies. They want a solution. Nobody on my senior team wants to touch it because it's messy. He looked me in the eye. You like messy. You lived in a storage room. I'm giving this project to you. If you fail, you're fired. If you succeed, I'll give you 10% of the contract value and a promotion. How much is the contract? I asked. $2 million over 5 years. $200,000. That was my cut. I felt a shiver run down my spine. It wasn't fear. It was hunger. Give me the files, I said. If you are enjoying Sloane's journey from the streets to the boardroom, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Also, comment down below which city you are watching from. Every comment helps this story reach more people. Thank you so much. The hospital project was a nightmare, which was exactly why it was my golden ticket. For 3 months, I practically lived at the hospital's administrative basement. I smelled like antiseptic and vending machine coffee. Their system was a labyrinth of paper trails and Excel sheets from 2005. Nurses were hoarding supplies and sealing tiles because the inventory system was so unreliable they feared running out of 4 bags during emergencies. I didn't just write code. I followed the nurses. I watched the supply chain. I built a system that wasn't just a database, it was a predictive algorithm. It knew when a flu wave was hitting before the doctors did, just based on the uptick in saline usage. When I presented the final build to the hospital board, I was 22 years old. I was wearing a suit I bought at a discount outlet, but I stood tall. This system will save you $4 million in the first year by eliminating waste and emergency rush ordering, I told the board. They were skeptical. Then I ran the simulation. The room went silent. Felix signed the contract a week later. My cut, the commission he promised, hit my bank account on a Tuesday. $215,000. I stared at the number on my phone screen. I refreshed the app. I logged out and logged back in. It was still there. For the first time in 4 years, the knot in my chest loosened just a fraction. But only a fraction. I didn't go out and buy a Porsche. I didn't move into a penthouse. I kept my rusty Honda, I had fixed the starter. I stayed in my studio apartment, though I did buy a better mattress. The scarcity mindset is a scar that never really fades. I looked at that money and I didn't see luxury, I saw a fortress. I saw 5 years of rent. I saw 10 years of food. I saw safety. But with safety came curiosity. Dangerous curiosity. I hadn't spoken to my parents in 4 years. I had no idea if they were dead or alive, rich or poor. I hired a private investigator. Not a high-end corporate one, just a guy named Miller who worked out of a strip mall and charged $50 an hour. I just want a financial snapshot, I told him. Assets, liabilities, living situation. Don't make contact. 2 weeks later, Miller handed me a manila folder. I opened it sitting in my car. They had done it. They had bought the lake house. There was a photo of it, a sprawling, 3-story Victorian estate right on the water in Traverse City. It was beautiful. It was everything Pamela had ever talked about. But then I turned the page to the financial summary. Mortgage, $1.2 million. Monthly payment, $8,000. Credit card utilization, 95%. Car leases, 2 Mercedes-Benz SUVs, leased. They were living the dream, but they were drowning to pay for it. The report noted that Walter had taken early retirement to manage his investments, which was code for unemployed. Pamela was selling high-end skincare products for a multi-level marketing company, basically a pyramid scheme with better packaging. They were house poor. They had the mansion, but they were likely eating generic mac and cheese inside of it. I felt a surge of dark satisfaction. They were struggling. But then I turned to the last photo in the file, and my satisfaction turned into ice-cold rage. The photo was taken from a distance, likely from a car parked on the street. It showed the front yard of the lake house. Pamela was sitting on the wraparound porch in a wicker chair, holding a glass of wine. She looked regal, like the queen of the castle. But in the background, near the garage, was a girl. She looked about 16. She was on her knees, scrubbing the oil stains on the driveway with a brush. She was wearing baggy, worn-out clothes that looked suspiciously like the old clothes I had left behind. "Who is this?" I asked Miller, pointing at the girl. "That's the foster kid," Miller said, chewing on a toothpick. "Name's Maya. State records show they took her in about 6 months after you left. They get a monthly stipend from the state for fostering her." My blood ran cold. They didn't replace me because they missed having a daughter. They replaced me because they needed the income stream. I went home and opened my laptop. I became an internet stalker. It wasn't hard to find Maya. Kids leave digital footprints everywhere. I found her Instagram. It was private, but I created a fake account, a photography enthusiast profile, and requested to follow her. She accepted within an hour. Her feed was a cry for help disguised as teenage angst. There were no pictures of family vacations. No selfies with mom and dad. It was mostly artsy shots of the lake, usually taken from the window of what looked like the attic. I scrolled back 3 years. Post from 2 years ago, caption, "Grateful to have a roof over my head. Even if the price is being the maid." Post from 6 months ago, photo of a pile of laundry. Caption, "She says if I don't finish this by noon, I can't go to the library. Cinderella vibes LOL." Post from last week, a text post on a black background. "She told me I'm lucky they put up with me because nobody else wanted me. Sometimes I think she's right." I slammed my laptop shut. I was shaking. It was the same script. Pamela hadn't changed. She was just using a new actor for her play. She was taking this girl's state support money to pay for her Mercedes lease, and in exchange, she was crushing Maya's self-esteem just like she had crushed mine. She was calling Maya unwanted to keep her compliant. To keep her working. To keep the check coming. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was dangerous. For 4 years, my goal had been to survive. To prove them wrong by existing. But seeing Maya on that driveway changed the mission parameters. Survival wasn't enough. I needed to dismantle them. I called Felix the next morning. "I want to pivot," I said. "Inventory systems are fine, but I want to get into finance. Specifically, debt acquisition." Felix paused on the other end of the line. "That's a Shark Tank, Sloan. Why the sudden interest in finance?" "Because," I said, staring at the photo of Maya scrubbing the driveway. "I realized that some debts need to be collected." By the time I was 24, I had launched my own boutique firm under Felix's umbrella. We called it Phoenix Holdings. Our business model was unglamorous but incredibly profitable. We bought distressed debt from regional banks. When a bank has a loan that isn't being paid, a mortgage, a business loan, a line of credit, it becomes a liability on their books. They hate it. They just want it gone so they can pass their audits. So, they bundle these bad loans together and sell them to investors for pennies on the dollar. I was the investor. I bought the paper. I became the bank. I could restructure the loan to help the person, or I could foreclose and take the collateral. I was good at it because I understood desperation. I could look at a file and tell the difference between a good person having a bad year and a con artist trying to game the system. I spent months building my capital. I reinvested every dollar. I was worth nearly $2 million on paper, but I still drove my Honda. I was waiting for one specific opportunity. I had Miller, my PI, monitoring the bank that held the mortgage on the lake house. It happened in November. "They missed a payment," Miller texted me. 30 days late. A month later, 60 days late. The bank has moved the loan to their special assets division. That was the signal. I set up a meeting with the vice president of that bank. It was a small regional bank, the kind that was terrified of bad quarterly reports. I walked into his office wearing a sharp black suit. I didn't look like the homeless girl anymore. I looked like money. I'm looking to acquire a specific tranche of high-risk residential mortgages in northern Michigan, I told him. I'm willing to pay cash, and I can close in 48 hours. The VP looked relieved. He handed me a list of troubled assets. I scanned the spreadsheet. My finger traced down the rows until I found it. Property address, 1402, Lakeside Drive. Borrowers, Walter and Pamela Bennett. Status, 90 days delinquent. Outstanding balance, $1.1 million. I'll take this bundle, I said, circling the group that included my parents' house. Excellent, the VP said, probably wondering why I wanted a pile of garbage loans. We can have the paperwork ready by tomorrow. The next day, I wired the money. I sat in my office, holding the deed of trust. It was just a piece of paper, but it felt heavier than lead. Technically, I didn't own the house yet. But I owned the debt. I owned the right to demand payment. I owned the power to say time's up. I was their creditor. And they had absolutely no idea. I looked at the calendar. Christmas was coming up. It seemed like the perfect time to send a greeting card. I called my lawyer. Draft a demand letter for the Bennett property. Notice of default. And find a way to contact the minor living in the home, Maya. I have a scholarship program I want to offer her. The first phase of a hostile takeover is to cut off the target's lifelines. I sent the demand letter via a third-party law firm so my name wouldn't appear. It was standard boilerplate, you are in default. Pay the full arrears of $24,000 within 10 days, or we will accelerate the loan. Accelerating the loan meant demanding the entire $1 million immediately. According to Miller's reports, panic set in at the lake house. Pamela was frantic. She tried to borrow money from her friends, but she had burned those bridges years ago with her arrogance. You can't spend a decade bragging about how rich you are and then ask to borrow $5,000 without people asking questions. Walter, in a stroke of desperate genius, decided to gamble. He took the last of their liquid savings, money that should have gone to the mortgage, and put it into a new cryptocurrency that his investment guru friend recommended. He thought he could turn $20,000 into $100,000 overnight and save the house. It was a classic desperation play. And like all desperation plays, it failed. The coin rug pulled 3 days later. Their $20,000 turned into 14 cents. While they were drowning, I threw a lifeline to the only person in that house who mattered. I had my lawyer contact Maya's school guidance counselor. We set up an anonymous tech scholarship for underprivileged youth. The offer was simple, a full ride to a coding boot camp in California, including housing, airfare, and a living stipend. It started the day after her 18th birthday, which was just 2 weeks away. Maya accepted immediately. I saw the email confirmation. She was packing her bags. I imagined the conversation in the lake house. Pamela probably screamed that Maya was ungrateful for leaving. She probably realized that once Maya turned 18 and left, the state checks would stop. The walls were closing in. 10 days passed. No payment came from my parents. I was sitting in my office when my lawyer called. The deadline has passed, Sloan. They haven't paid. They sent a letter asking for a hardship extension, claiming unexpected market volatility. Denied, I said instantly. Initiate foreclosure. I want them out. It's winter, Sloan, my lawyer warned. Judges don't like winter evictions. They have 2 leased Mercedes in the driveway and wine in the cellar, I said cold. They aren't destitute, they are delinquent. Proceed. The foreclosure process usually takes months. But when you are the bank, and you are willing to pay for expedited legal processing, things move faster. Plus, Pamela and Walter ignored the court summons. They ignored it because they thought they were above it. They thought if they just ignored the mail, it wasn't real. They were living in a delusion where bad things only happened to other people, people like their failure of a daughter. The sheriff arrived on a gray Tuesday morning in January. I wasn't there, but Miller sent me the video. A deputy knocked on the door. Walter answered, looking gray and sickly. He tried to argue. He pointed at the house like he couldn't believe this was happening to him. Then Pamela came out. She wasn't the regal queen anymore. She was screeching. She threatened to sue the sheriff. She screamed that she knew the mayor. The sheriff just handed them the eviction order. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises before the locks are changed. 24 hours. They scrambled. They filled their leased SUVs with clothes, jewelry, and silverware. They couldn't take the furniture. They couldn't take the artwork. And the best part? Maya was already gone. Her birthday had been 2 days prior. A car service, paid for by my scholarship fund, had picked her up at midnight. She was already in San Francisco, safe, warm, and far away from Pamela's toxicity. Pamela had lost her house and her income stream in the same week. Miller reported that they checked into a motel on the outskirts of town. Not a nice hotel. A motel where the sign flickered and they charged by the week. It was poetic. They were now living the life they had forced me into 7 years ago. Technically, when a house is foreclosed, it goes to a public auction. But the bank, me, sets the starting bid. And if nobody matches the outstanding debt, the property reverts to the bank. I set the starting bid at the exact amount of the debt, $1.1 million. Nobody in the local market was going to pay that cash on a Tuesday morning for a house with questionable maintenance records. So, I won. Or rather, Phoenix Holdings LLC won. I stood in the county clerk's office as my lawyer signed the final paperwork. Congratulations, the clerk said, stamping the deed. It's a beautiful property. Shame about the previous owners. Heard they trashed their credits so bad they can't even rent a U-Haul. I took the deed. The paper was crisp. Yes, I said. A real shame. I spent the next month renovating. I didn't move in immediately. I hired crews to strip the wallpaper Pamela had chosen. I ripped out the carpets she had walked on. I wanted to purge the house of their energy. I installed a state-of-the-art security system. Gates, cameras, motion sensors. I moved in on my 25th birthday. March 3rd. Exactly 7 years to the day since I left. I sat in the living room, listening to the silence. It didn't feel like a home yet. It felt like a trophy. Miller told me that Pamela and Walter were getting desperate. The motel money was running out. The leased cars had been repossessed. They were telling anyone who would listen that they were victims of a massive banking error and that they would be reinstated any day now. They heard rumors, of course. Small towns talk. They heard that a young tech investor had bought the house. And that brings us back to tonight. To the rain. To the gate. They didn't know it was me. They just knew that someone rich lived here, and they were arrogant enough to think they could charm their way in. Open the gate, I said into the intercom. The heavy iron gates groaned and swung open slowly. Pamela and Walter hesitated. They looked at each other. I could see the hope flaring up in their eyes. They probably thought the new owner was some clueless out-of-towner they could manipulate. Maybe they planned to offer their services as caretakers for the property they used to own. They began the long walk up the driveway. The rain was relentless. They were soaked to the bone. Walter was limping slightly. I watched them from the window. They looked small. When I was 18, they looked like giants. They held all the cards. They controlled the food, the shelter, the love. Now, shuffling up my driveway in the mud, they just looked like two broke, middle-aged people who had made a series of terrible life choices. They reached the front porch. I let them stand there for a moment, shivering under the overhang. I opened the massive oak front door. I was wearing a white silk blouse and black trousers. My hair was cut in a sharp bob. I held my wine glass in one hand. They looked up. For a solid 10 seconds, there was only the sound of the rain. Pamela blinked. She squinted, water dripping from her nose. Her brain simply refused to process the image. "Sloane," she whispered. It wasn't a question, it was a malfunction. "Hello, Mother," I said. My voice was calm. "You're dripping on my porch." "You?" Walter stammered. "You work here? For the new owner?" I took a sip of wine. "I am the owner, Dad. And the lender. And the person who authorized your eviction." Pamela let out a sound like a deflating tire. She grabbed the doorframe for support. That's impossible. You're a waitress. You're on drugs." "I own a private equity firm," I corrected. "I specialize in distressed assets. And let me tell you, your portfolio was very distressed." The shock on Pamela's face morphed instantly into something else. It was terrifying how fast she switched masks. The confusion vanished, replaced by a sickly, desperate warmth. "Sloane," she cried out, taking a step toward me with her arms open. "Oh my God. Walter, look. It's our girl. She did it. I told you she had it in her." She tried to hug me. I took a step back. "Don't touch me. You're wet, and this is silk." Pamela froze, her arms still raised. "Sweetie, please. We've been so worried about you. We lost touch. We didn't know how to find you. You blocked my number," I said. "And you told the whole town I was a junkie." "We were trying to protect you," she lied effortlessly. "We had to use tough love. And look." She gestured around at the house. "It worked. You're successful. We made you strong. We did this for you." I almost laughed. It was breathtaking. The mental gymnastics required to take credit for my success while standing in the rain because I evicted them. "You think you deserve credit?" I asked. "Come inside. Just to the foyer. I have something to show you." They stepped into the foyer. They looked around greedily, their eyes assessing the renovations, calculating the value. I walked to a small table by the door. On it sat a framed document. "Do you remember my 18th birthday?" I asked. "That was a difficult day," Walter muttered, looking at his shoes. "We were under a lot of stress." "You gave me a lecture on ROI, I said. Return on investment. You called me a rotten investment. You said you were cutting your losses." I picked up the frame. Inside, pressed behind UV protective glass, were the bills they had given me. 2 20s. A 5. 2 1s. $47, I said. "Sloane, please," Pamela begged, her voice cracking. "We're your parents. We're homeless. We're sleeping in a car. You have all this space. We can stay in the guest house. We can help you run the estate. We're family." "Family?" I repeated. "No. In this house, we speak business. You taught me that." I set the frame down. "I ran the numbers on you too," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "You are bad debt. You are a liability. You took a child, me, and treated her like a stock that didn't perform. Then you took Maya and treated her like an income stream." Pamela paled. "How do you know about Maya?" "I'm the one who sent her to California," I revealed. "I'm the reason your stipend check stopped coming." Pamela looked like she had been slapped. "Now," I continued, "I believe in settling accounts. You gave me a severance package when you terminated our relationship. It's only fair I do the same." I reached into my pocket and pulled out an envelope. I held it out to Walter. He took it with shaking hands. He opened it. Inside was $47. What is this? He whispered. That is your ROI, I said. I'm returning your initial capital. The rest? The millions I made? That's my equity. I built that from zero. You don't get a dividend on an investment you sold 7 years ago. You can't do this. Pamela screamed, the mask finally falling off completely. Her face twisted into the ugly snarl I remembered from my childhood. I gave you life. You ungrateful little bitch. This is my house. I picked out this wallpaper. And I paid to have it ripped out, I said coldly. It was tacky. I pressed a button on the wall. Security. Remove the trespassers. 2 large men in raincoats stepped out from the hallway shadows. They had been waiting. No. Pamela shrieked as one of the guards grabbed her arm. You can't. People will know. I'll tell everyone what a monster you are. Go ahead, I said. Tell them. Tell them the truth. Tell them you raised a shark. Walter didn't fight. He just looked at me, tears streaming down his face. Sloane. I'm sorry. I know you are, Dad, I said. You're sorry you bet on the wrong horse. Goodbye. I watched from the doorway as security dragged them down the driveway. Pamela was kicking and screaming the whole way. Walter just walked, defeated, into the dark. They disappeared past the gate. The iron bars clanged shut. I locked the front door. I walked into the kitchen. Sitting at the island, drinking a cup of hot cocoa, was Maya. She had flown back from California for the weekend to be here for this. She looked healthy. Her hair was clean, her clothes were new, and she was smiling. Did they see you? I asked. No, Maya said. I stayed in the back like you said. Did she scream? Like a banshee, I said, pouring myself a fresh glass of wine. Good, Maya said viciously. Then she looked at me. Are you okay? I thought about it. Was I okay? I had just evicted my parents. I had just watched them beg and turned them away. By any standard definition of morality, I was a villain. But then I looked at Maya. I looked at the house that was safe and warm. I looked at my bank account which no longer hovered near zero. Yeah, I said. I think I am. My parents never recovered. They divorced a month later. Pamela moved to Florida to live with a distant cousin who she eventually alienated too. Last I heard, she was working as a greeter at a Walmart, checking receipts at the door. Walter moved into a state-subsidized senior living facility. He sends me letters sometimes. I don't open them. I kept the lake house. I turned the guest wing into a temporary housing unit for girls aging out of the foster system. Girls like Maya. Girls who were told they were worthless mistakes. I teach them how to code. I teach them how to invest. But mostly, I teach them how to value themselves so nobody can ever liquidate them. I looked at the $47 framed in the foyer one last time before turning off the lights. Some people say revenge is empty. They say it doesn't bring you peace. I disagree. Revenge is a dish best served with a side of financial independence and a view of the lake. So, tell me honestly, was I too cruel for buying their house and watching them get dragged out like trash? Or was this the perfect return on investment for the rotten childhood they gave me? Thank you for listening to this story of ultimate karma. If you enjoyed watching the rotten investment become the boss, please hit that subscribe button and like this video. It helps me share more stories like this. See you in the next one.